Liberal MP Jason Falinski, Labor MP Tim Watts, welcome to both of you. Thanks very much for being here this Sunday afternoon. Jason Falinski, I'll come straight to you. This audit internal of the credentials of coalition MPs and senators, just how rigorous is it? What exactly does it involve? Who's doing it?
So I have not been approached about any internal audit by the Liberal Party. I was not allowed to nominate before I'd gone through the nomination review committee, and that involved an extensive questionnaire about my genealogy, I suppose, or my family tree. And my nomination wasn't accepted until they were satisfied that I complied with the Constitution.
Yes, you're in an interesting position, are you not? Certainly you were born in Australia, but you've got a grandfather from Poland, a grandmother from Russia. Your father was born in Kazakhstan, I think it was, but grew up in Poland. What was the extent of the checks that you had to make when you were in the process of being nominated for the seat of Mackellar to make sure that either by descent, even going back to your grandparents, there was no citizenship rights attached to Kazakhstan, Poland or indeed Russia?
Yeah, so there are 195 countries in the world apparently, and I've had to cover off 7 of them. The fact is that, just as an aside, my grandfather was born before Poland came into existence. My father was born in a country that no longer exists, being the USSR, and Poland didn't exist at the time. So, I know more about citizenship law than I ever wanted to know out of those countries, Jim.
Look, I'll come back to you, Jason Falinski, in a moment with some get some other details about this. But Tim Watts, now I know that one of your forebears, at least, was a member of the first Queensland Parliament back in the 19th century, but in running for
Gellerbrand... that's cause for an audit already, Jim. Just that fact.
Indeed. But Tim Watts, in nominating for the seat of Gellerbrand for the Labor Party, just what did the audit, if I can put it that way, of your entitlements and the question of citizenship, what did that involve?
Well, it's a lengthy genealogical process, Jim. I have to disclose my own birth circumstances, those of my parents and grandparents, those of my wife and her parents as well. It's a very rigorous process. In fact, candidates are known to complain to each other about what a pain it is. But no one's complaining in this parliament with the fiasco, the debacle, the shambles that we've seen other political parties get themselves into here. And what Bill Shorten has said this week, Jim, is that it's gone past the point where we can just take people's word on this. We need a process of universal disclosure of those genealogical details to the parliament so that we can make a objective a judgment about people's
Tim Watts, isn't this a case of all care, no responsibility? You're in opposition, you haven't got the numbers in the lower house, you couldn't pass a resolution, there's no specific details. It's really, as I say, all care, no responsibility.
Well, it'd be great, Jim, if we had a Prime Minister who actually cared about the legitimacy of the Parliament and the legitimacy of his leadership. If Malcolm Turnbull was a leader who could show some actual...
Jason Falinski, I'll come to you in a moment.
Jason, when is he going to act? When is Malcolm Turnbull going to act? What we are seeing today is a daily soap drama, daily soap opera. Do we know that Alex Hawke followed the same process to disclose his birth circumstances as Julia Banks did in Victoria, as Steve Georgianis and Maria Van Vakenu did for the Labor Party? We just don't know. And Senator Parry's recent circumstances have shown that we can't take the word of the coalition anymore on this.
Jason Falinski?
Yes, Jim.
Yes, look, you were trying to butt in there before. I wanted to allow Tim Watts to have a word or two, but now it's your turn.
Okay. Well, can I just add to what Tim was saying about candidates complaining about the extensiveness? I thought they were being quite rude with the intrusiveness of some of the questions I was getting asked during my process. But look, we do have a process in place. It's one that has been established in the Constitution. It relies on every member of Parliament to ensure that they face up to their obligations under the Constitution. If they don't, there is only one body that can resolve that, and that is the High Court sitting as the Court of Disputed Returns. So if there is anyone in any doubt, they can be referred to the High Court, as 7 of our colleagues recently were, and the High Court will make a determination along those lines. In the case of Alex Hawke, we know the answer. We already know the answer, which is that Alex Hawke does not sit on any registry in any Hellenic municipality anywhere in the world and is therefore not a citizen of Greece.
Well, Jason, why was it good enough for Malcolm Turnbull to ask Bill Shorten to disclose his citizenship documents to the Parliament, but it's not good enough to ask whether a minority government's ability to hold Parliament in this power, which depends on Mr Hawke's vote, why isn't it good enough to ask him to show those documents, the renunciation documents that he needs to show?
Well, that's not the case, Tim, and you know that's not the case.
No, it's not.
Alex Hawke was...
Maria Van Bakenu and Steve Georgianis, and for that matter, Liberal Party members in Victoria have done this.
Tim, let me clear this up for you. Alex Hawke was never a member, was never a citizen of Greece. Therefore, there was nothing for him to renounce.
What did Petro Georgiou do,
Bill Shorten was a citizen of the United Kingdom, and therefore, along with people such as Tony Abbott and Paul Fletcher, had to renounce their citizenship of the United Kingdom. All 3 have shown their renunciation documents to the United Kingdom because that's the process that the United Kingdom has.
Justin Falinski, isn't the problem here? I'm a little surprised to discover that, particularly with your genealogy, that in the wake of the Citizenship 7 case and what fell out there, and then also what we saw with Stephen Parry in particular, that someone within the coalition, either within the Prime Minister's office or within the party organisation, hasn't gone around checking again, because public confidence in all members of Parliament is at risk here, and in these circumstances it generally falls on the government rather than the opposition as a result.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Jim, and I'm not saying they haven't. What I'm saying is that because of my circumstances, before I was allowed to nominate, I had a very extensive interview with the party and documentation and investigation and all of those sorts of things before my nomination was accepted. I suspect, or don't know, but I suspect every member of Parliament, even Josh Frydenberg said this week, when this issue first came up, it gave him cause to go back and review his situation, and he was satisfied that he complied with Section 44(1). I'm sure there are lots of members of Parliament who did that and took that moment to reflect on their situation. I'm a new member of Parliament, so I had to do that more recently, and therefore there would be very little point in reviewing my circumstances by the party or by myself.
Same question for you, Tim Watts. In the wake of the High Court's recent decision, which reiterates and probably even more firmly the original Sykes-Cleary decision of 1992, what steps is Labor taking to check the credentials of members of Parliament and senators? Who's involved? What does it entail?
Well, Jim, as you said, the High Court decision really confirmed the state of the law as we understood it prior to those referrals. So we had a rigorous vetting process, and we've said that we've got nothing to hide. We're willing to show in a mutual way that the documents relating to our members of Parliament to the Parliament on an agreed basis with the coalition. But I might just say, Jason's comments there are quite extraordinary. What we now see is that there is some kind of audit going on in the Liberal Party, but with no transparency at all. Their own members don't know what's going on.
I didn't say that.
Malcolm Turnbull won't front up to the Australian people and say that he is...
Tim, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Jason Falinski...
You have clearly been given key points that you want to make, key talking points that you want to make, and regardless of what I say, you're going to make them. But I did not say that an audit is going on with the Liberal Party at the time. Well, I'm unaware of any audit. You clearly seem to know more about what's going on in the Liberal Party than I do.
All I know is what's in the papers, Jason, because the Prime Minister's not being upfront with us about what's going on.
Well, sorry, it was in the paper. It must be true.
That's the paper that knocked off the Deputy Prime Minister and a number of other members of Parliament recently. So that's the only reason we heard about Barnaby Joyce's status was because of very good reporting from the press gallery in Australia. Otherwise, we would have never heard about that.
The only reason we heard about Barnaby Joyce's status is because the Chief of Staff to Senator Penny Wong got a question asked in a foreign parliament as to his status.
We're back to the
That's the only
conspiracy
reason
theory.
why. Well, did that or did that not happen, Tim?
No, what happened was Fairfax journalists told Barnaby Joyce that he was about to publish
had a member of Parliament in the New Zealand Parliament
and then he went
ask questions about...
Jason Falinski, you'll get a go in a moment. Hang on there. Tim Watts?
Sure.
What happened very clearly with Barnaby Joyce was that Fairfax had been chasing him for weeks on his genealogy. They put a question to him saying that we are now confident that that your father was born in New Zealand, that you have citizenship of New Zealand by descent, and we are going to publish that article. And before they could publish, Barnaby Joyce walked into the Parliament and made a disclosure. That's what happened here. And with this audit that's going on inside the Liberal Party, we don't know. Maybe they're telling their MPs to sit tight and shut up, just like Senator Mitch Fifield told Senator Parry.
He said nothing of the sort. He said nothing of the sort. Labor is just desperate.
All we can do is take Senator Parry's word for this.
All you want to do is create chaos for no other reason than the fact that you want to create it.
No, we want to work in a bipartisan way with the government to disclose all documents to the Parliament.
Very funny way.
We've made an offer and Malcolm Turnbull seems to have rejected it, but it's a standing offer and frankly it's the only way to resolve this soap opera. This is going to continue to dog the leadership of Malcolm Turnbull.
To make a determination on the status of members of Parliament. And if anyone is under suspicion, then they should be referred to the High Court to make that determination. It's the only body empowered to do so. And you know that can only happen with a referral from the Parliament. We are setting in place a process in the Parliament in order to address these issues, respecting the supremacy of the Parliament.
Yeah, why not have a transparent audit? Kevin Andrews, speaking on Sky News this morning, says he thinks that's a good idea and indeed it would improve public faith in Malcolm Turnbull's leadership. Is he simply being mischievous or isn't he really more in line with public opinion than the Prime Minister?
Well, there are many adjectives to describe Kevin Andrews, but mischievous is not one that jumps to mind. Look, the fact of the matter is that the people want us to get on with dealing with issues that are of concern to them. They find this is an unnecessary and irritating distraction. An audit or a universal declaration is not going to do that because, as the Prime Minister has pointed out again and again and again, there is only one body empowered in Australia that can make determinations of this nature, and that is the High Court sitting as the Court of Disputed Returns. So you can have an audit, you can have a universal declaration, but ultimately it's the High Court that has to make these determinations.
Now, look, I accept that point, that indeed it is the case that, as the Prime Minister has said, that is the High Court which determines the eligibility or otherwise of members of Parliament. But the fact is that in the eyes of the public, it does appear that there's something of a cover-up here, that you are running scared, that is the government, and whether or not final determination comes out of a transparent and public audit, you've actually got nothing to lose. In fact, you've got something to gain in the public's eyes by making what findings you have public.
So that's one interpretation of what would occur. Another interpretation is that we would have 18 months of an inquiry that would hardly be transparent, that in many cases will not be able to make conclusions, that will need to be an expertise in the immigration and citizenship laws of 194 countries, in fact possibly more countries, because some countries that don't exist and some countries that are yet to exist. And that is the biggest problem here. The way that the High Court has interpreted this clause of the Constitution means that the Australian Constitution and members of Parliament are not subjected necessarily only to the laws of Australia, but to the laws of many other nations, their customs and their deliberations. An audit's not going to fix that. A universal declaration is not going to fix that.
It's also the case, Tim Watts, that there's some truth there in what Jason Falinski is saying. It would be very time-consuming and it would not be authoritative. It would not be the end of the matter.
I don't accept that at all, Jim. I mean, we've just been talking about the processes that both of the parties have in place in the lead-up to elections to vet their candidates. I can tell you that the Labor Party's vetting process, and we have candidates from a very large number of different genealogical backgrounds, didn't take anywhere near 18 months. This is something that can be addressed promptly. And I might just also object to Jason's statement that this is something that the public are not interested in. Members of Parliament, you get the feeling in the community about what the people are really talking about. And I felt it when Bronwyn Bishop used her helicopter. It's something that people raised with you everywhere you went. This citizenship issue is something that people raise with you everywhere you go, in every part of the community, in schools, in community functions, at business lunches. It's the first thing people raise. And the only way that we'll resolve it is putting a process in place for disclosure to the Parliament. And the Parliament can then make a referral to the High Court for the ultimate resolution. No one's disputing that. But at the moment, there is no process that will bring parliamentarians to objectively disclose their documents so that we can make a decision on this and move forward.
It certainly is the case, Jason Falinski, that ordinary members of public that I run into, and I'm not saying this is an accurate sample or not, say to me, it looks like there's one rule for politicians and another rule for ordinary people. If we fall foul of our declarations for welfare benefits or what have you, there's no there's no benefit of doubt, none whatsoever. And yet here are the politicians refusing to tell us why they should actually be members of parliament, represent our electorates.
Well, Jim, can I firstly say that I agree with Tim in that everywhere I'm going, whether it's schools, churches, Chamber of Commerce, people raise this issue with me. But it's usually followed with the sentence of, can't you guys resolve this and just move on? And the fact of the matter
Some leadership,
is...
they're calling out for it, Jason.
And the fact of the matter is, thank you, Tim, and the fact of the matter, I deserve it. And the fact of the matter is that when people are fall foul of the law, whether it be welfare benefits, whether it be tax, whether it be anything, they are given an opportunity to put their case, and then there are capacities for them to have any decision made reviewed. We have a process in place similar to that. It's called the High Court of Australia, sitting as the Court of Disputed Returns. The Parliament can refer anyone that it believes may have contravened sections 44(1) or just section 44 and all the different ways that may have happened to the High Court. So these things can be done. By trying to create an audit is similar to us saying we're going to audit every person who receives welfare or the pension or whatever, for no other good reason.
I think that happens
than the
pretty
fact
regularly, Jason, actually.
It doesn't happen, Tim. People are only audited when there is...
Did you miss robo-debt, Jason?
When there is cause given or cause arises for them to be audited, whether it be in tax, whether it be in welfare payments, whether it be in any of these things. Those things are the things that, how that applies there, how it should apply in the Parliament. Otherwise, Jim, it's going to be an exhaustive, expensive, long-term distraction, which will, in the end, decide nothing.
Jason Falinski, you're saying you want to put this behind you, but MPs from both sides of Parliament have been telling me that the number of people whose citizenship credentials could be in doubt could be as high as 40. And that's beyond the 7 who've already been dealt with by the High Court, beyond Stephen Parry. That being the case, it's not going to get behind you quickly, is it?
Yeah. So what you've just defined then is a witch hunt. There are 40 people we suspect, we don't know, why don't we throw them in the well?
No, I'm not making the allegation. I'm not making the allegation, Jason Falinski. I'm saying that there are members on both sides of the Parliament who've said this to me.
Allow me to restate. What you're reporting to me that other members of Parliament have said is the very definition of a witch hunt. That we suspect there may be people who have contravened section 44(1). No evidence, no cause, no reasoning for that. Maybe they've got a funny sounding last name. So why don't we just throw them all in a well? If they float, they are clearly in breach of 44(1), and if they sink, they were probably innocent. I mean, this is not how our legal system operates. For 1,000 years, people have been presumed innocent until found guilty. And what we are trying to do is upend that principle for why? For political convenience? It just doesn't make sense to me. And I know Tim has a law degree, he worked as a lawyer, I know he understands that.
Tim, there is this question of the reverse onus of proof. Now, it has applied and been dealt with on the demand of the Prime Minister in the case of Bill Shorten, but Labor was constantly making that point and very resistant to it till the very last minute. This would, if you have this audit, involve upending what is one of the foundational principles of the way in which the law is conducted in this country.
Well, I don't think that's the case, Jim. You don't need to throw anyone down a well to determine the legal status of people's eligibility. The High Court will determine that on existing principles of an onus of proof. I would say, though, that in a scenario where we've already had 7 and we're about to have 8 members of parliament excluded for not understanding the way these provisions work, for not understanding the way that citizenship by descent operates. It is reasonable to ask questions of members of parliament whose parents were born overseas, whether they understood the operation of that provision, whether they have made efforts to, reasonable efforts to renounce any other citizenships that they may have acquired by descent. In the context that we sit in today, where this fiasco, this debacle, this crisis has been running for weeks and weeks and weeks, we think it's fair enough to ask members of parliament to disclose those documents to the parliament, where the parliament can make a decision and make that referral to the High Court.
Jason Falinski, unfortunately our time is up. Tim Watts, thank you to you too. I do appreciate the spirit with which both of you have engaged in this discussion. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Tim.
In a moment, all the sport, but now